Welcome to another episode of Heated Conversations. Thank you for tuning in. And we have yet another Division III program. And this Division III program is located in Minnesota. We have head coach Aryn DeGrood, who's here on the podcast with us to talk about her program at Gustavus College. Let's tune into the podcast. Hey, Aryn, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on today. I'm excited.
If you could have anybody in the world cook you any meal, what would you request of that person to make you, and who would you request for that person to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not, I mean, I'd take anybody, but I think if I could do anybody, and I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit because I'm a history major, so I'd cheat with history a little bit. And I'm just gonna say my grandma. My grandma passed away 10 years ago. And we were close growing up. I called her all the time, but we didn't live by each other. So it's not the typical Minnesota family where you're all from the same area. My parents aren't from Minnesota. Um, And so I would say my grandma, and she always made stuffed cabbage rolls. And as a kid, I never ate it. I thought that was disgusting. And now as an adult, I'll eat it. It's not my favorite, but I'll eat it. But I know there's just family history and cultural history there for our family. She did a lot of genealogy stuff, and so I would just ask her. I want to know more about our family history and where we come from and how your parents got to the United States, how my grandpa's parents got here, and also what her life was like during the war. My grandma was a she never told me this, but she told my dad they watched A League of Their Own one time, and my grandma casually at like 85 years old looked at my dad and said, "I did that." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "I was on one of those teams." So she played professional female baseball in the 40s during World War II. She worked as a drafter and made in the 40s like $30 an hour. But then as soon as my grandpa came home, she had to stop working and then have kids and raise my mom and her sister. And I just want to know for her what life was like back then.
Yeah. Do you know where your family is from or where she was from?
So her family's German,
Okay.
and then my grandpa's family's Slovakian. And so I know that there's a lot of heritage and sauerkraut was big and all of that kind of cooking and all of that. But I would just want to know more about it because I know my grandpa's parents immigrated here directly through Ellis Island. So like that's pretty cool. But I don't know about her parents, and my mom just doesn't history is not her thing, and like she doesn't really care about family history, unfortunately, for me and my love of it. So I just
Yeah.
love to know more about that.
Now, was she ever in Minnesota when you were there, especially as a student athlete or even as your time? Because I know you're in your 10th season at Gustavus currently, right? And
Yeah.
so, and the timeline is around the time when you probably got that head coach position or either were in it or about to get it. So, was she able to kind of see that happen, or, was it a little bit before that?
So she wasn't. My path to coaching here is kind of crazy, and I tell athletes this all the time because I am like the epitome of go to a liberal arts school because you never know what you're gonna do. And I thought I know what I want to do. I actually transferred to Gustavus. So she was here for all of that. My high school athletics, she came to club meets, she went to track meets, I did track in college as well. And she came to that in college. But then so I think my timeline's a little off. I think it's been 11 years since she died because I was an assistant for a year here before I got the head job. My now husband, we were just dating at the time. My now husband took the assistant coach basketball job. Um, and so we moved down here back to St. Peter. And it was right after we had moved in that my grandma passed away. And so she didn't get to see that. She knew I was moving down here. She knew I was going to coach at Gustavus again. And I know she was excited about that for me. But we never got the chance. She never got the chance to see me actually do it as a head coach. But I know she's watching. I know she's cheering me on. She was always one of my biggest supporters.
Yeah. And where does she reside? Because you said your family is not from Minnesota, but you grew up in Minnesota, right?
Yeah, so we were all over. My parents waited a long time to have kids, but my mom's from Indiana, just outside Chicago in Hammond, Indiana, so just across the border from Illinois. And my dad's actually from Niagara Falls, Ontario. So technically, I am a dual citizen. I have my Canadian citizenship, but anybody probably from that area will tell you, like, if you're talking true Canadians, like he's on the U.S. border, and you hop the border all the time there. So, he's not full blown Canadian, but he'll say he is.
Yeah. And so my second question is, if you could see anybody live in concert, dead or alive, who would you go see and who would you take with you?
So that's a really hard one. I this last year went to a lot of concerts and checked off a lot of my boxes for myself. I went to my top two concerts with Ed Sheeran and Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is vastly different music. So it would either be Tom Petty and take my daughters, because during COVID we stayed with my mother-in-law and they have a record player. We'd listen to American Girl and they just love that song. Or it would probably be Queen with Freddie Mercury, and go my mom, because she's a huge Queen fan. And I grew up, my parents went to concerts all the time. Like, they loved concerts, and so they kind of instilled that in me. And so she never got to see Queen live, and so I think that I would take her to see Queen.
Yeah. No, and I think it's cool how, you're close to your family and even just all these things connect back to your family, either your grandma, either your mother, your own daughters and stuff like that. Can you kind of talk about how your family is close to you and how you integrate that in your coaching, and especially with some of the females that are in your family that you had mentioned that are really significant to you?
Yeah, so it's funny because I think if you ask my parents, they would tell me that family's not important to me. But it is. I think that they don't see it because they don't live here. So my mom's in Florida half the time. My dad lives in Rochester, Minnesota with my brother. But my husband and I are really close with our families. And so my mom and his mom are probably the two most influential women in my life. They come to all of his mom goes to all of my meets, all of his basketball games. My mom, whenever she's here, is at my stuff. But family is huge. And one thing I tell my team and I tell the recruits is, Gustavus is a family and the whole community is a family, but
Yeah.
bigger than that, we talk a lot about our team being a family. And I tell my athletes this all the time. I have two daughters, two biological daughters that, they see all the time, that are in the gym all the time. But then right now I have 20 girls on my team and I have 20 other daughters, they're my chosen family. And we talk a lot about, we are choosing to be a family and be together every day.
Right.
Um, and I very much view them as my athletes, but also as, my daughters, and I look out for them, and family is just a big piece of it. And we really integrate, their families are also important to our program and our family of Gustavus Gymnastics.
Right.
So we really focus a lot on families and family support. And I think just as I've gotten older, I took it for granted as a kid, and every kid I'm sure does, like, your parents are always there. They're always supporting you. It's like, yeah, of course, it's what moms do. It's what dads do. Right.
Right.
And I think now that I'm on the flip side of it, and now that I'm getting older, I truly appreciate the sacrifices that our parents make for our athletics. Gymnastics is A, expensive, and B, time consuming. I tell my coworkers, like, yeah, it was normal for me to grow up doing 30 hours a week of gymnastics plus full-time school. We didn't have the option of the online school, back then. I would love to pick the big club's brains about how they ran, practices back then, before they could do the half days at school.
Yeah.
Uh, but we didn't have that option, in the 90s and in the early 2000s. And the sacrifices that our parents made are just, I think you don't fully understand it until you're a parent and doing it
Yeah.
yourself. And I'm just starting that journey with my kids with athletics. Unfortunately, they're now making sacrifices because of my husband and I's schedule, but we're still in first grade and preschool, so we'll get there eventually.
Yeah. That's cool. And how special is it to have you and your husband? Because is he still coaching
Yeah, so he's
at
actually in his
Gustavus?
second year. Yeah, he's in his second year as the head coach for the basketball team now.
That's cool. How is it being? Because there's a few other people, actually, another one at Simpson, who one is the head coach at Emily's the head coach of the gymnastics program, and then her husband of the women's gymnastics program. Her husband is a head coach of the men's gymnastics program. And I also talked to Cal's head coach, co-head coach Justin. So he and his wife are co-head coaches there. And so, how's it being able to be in the same work space and workplace, not necessarily workspace, but workplace as your husband, and be in athletics and having that schedule and being able to like share that bond of both being head coaches, both being in athletics at the university that at the same university at the same time. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, it's awesome. We're so lucky. Obviously, when we met, and I knew from day one that his goal was to be a college head coach, and there are sacrifices that come with that. His dream job was this job. He wouldn't probably have admitted that before, and now he will. Um, but for a while we were working up the ladder, and I was willing to move wherever. And then I got the head job here, and I was like, nope, not leaving. I fell into this, and I now can't imagine doing anything different. And he's been so supportive. But it's nice because he understands it. Like, we both understand the sacrifices we have to make. But at the same time, it's really interesting because maybe for, I wonder for like Emily and her husband, like, or obviously Justin and Liz, and the Division I level is different with recruiting. They're traveling all over, and it's just a much bigger beast with scholarships and the elites and the internationals that they recruit. But so much of my recruiting is on Instagram and just texting and calling recruits. Whereas basketball is huge in Minnesota. And he's going to high school games all the time. Like this week, for example, he had the Wednesday, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday basketball game run, plus, game prep and all that, and now having to fit recruiting in. So it helps, I think, me understand his world, and I think it helps him understand my world. But the coolest part for me is obviously I get to see him, and so that helps our marriage, and I get more FaceTime with him than I would otherwise. But we surprisingly don't see each other that much during the day. But the coolest part for me is the relationship that we have with each other's athletes. I know his team so well. He knows my team very well. He used to be their strength coach for a couple of years, and now his assistant is. But one of my athletes has a student employment job, works for him. She also babysits my kids when we need it. So it's just, he's so tied in with my team. And it's really fun that he gets to see the connection that I have, and my team truly is my why of why I do what I do every day. Like, it's a lot to sacrifice, as to be a coach as being a parent.
Yeah.
And having incredible athletes that you just genuinely love to be around.
Right.
That makes it so worth it. And for him to get to see that, because it hasn't always been sunshine and roses for me. And I'm very open about this. I've had my mental health struggles, since COVID and all the things that everybody else has had.
Yeah.
And just my team is my why, and they're such amazing young women, and it makes the sacrifices so much easier than when your significant other gets to see it daily, right? They see it daily, but then also they see the work that he sees, the work my team puts in, I see the work his team puts in, and so then the successes just feel that much better.
Yeah. And is that like a culture there where, besides just you and your husband, whereas the different athletic programs support each other pretty heavy at Gustavus, where they go to each other's competitions and meets and stuff like that, and are supportive of, typically, with some of those sports like basketball or football or bigger sports, most of the athletes will just gravitate to go to those. But is that a culture at Gustavus where that's just kind of normal?
Yeah, it's huge here. And it has been, since I was an athlete here and can remember. Very much, the student athletes very much support each other, and they're a family and a community. They're some of my husband's players right now.
Nice.
I'm up in our new student athlete lounge filming because my office is full of gear and meat snacks. So,
Cool.
but yeah, it's very much the culture here at Gustavus that the athletes support each other. Honestly, I'd say besides football, our biggest event that all the athletes go to is women's volleyball. Those games get packed, and our volleyball team's really good. But they're just all so integrated with each other, and so interconnected that they very much support each other fully. They're always at each other's games, they're always at each other's meets or competitions or whatever it is. And we're really lucky, 42% of our student body population are varsity athletes at Gustavus. And so the one benefit of our small school is that so many of the student athletes understand each other's experiences and what it means to be a Gustavus student athlete.
Yeah. And you had mentioned too how you do a lot of your recruiting either through Instagram or phone calls, and your husband goes into high school. And one of the things that, for those who may not know, is high school gymnastics is actually a big deal in Minnesota. And so, do you have opportunities to go and watch some of those high school gymnastics meets, especially typically a lot of times if there's high caliber athletes, they either came from club at some point, or there is a program within a high school that has like their own kind of club within their school, right? And they kind of have a program that they kind of develop through like Mega, and it kind
Mhm.
of builds, right? So do you do much recruiting of high school gymnasts in Minnesota?
I do recruit high school gyms in Minnesota. It's unique. I know not every school will recruit high school gymnasts just because the high school rules don't require the gymnast to do the same level of gymnastics that you would do at level 10 or at the college level. But that's not to say they're not capable of it. That's just to say, like, one of my best beam workers right now in high school did a cartwheel round-off series because for her coach, she could get her bonus in dance, and so it wasn't worth it to take the risk on the aerial. she now competes in aerobic handspring for us and was our highest scorer last year. So it doesn't always, I guess, translate, what the coaches in high school choose to make them do. I don't have the opportunity to get out and go to as many high school meets as I used to, mainly just because of my kids, with my husband's schedule, and he has games every Saturday. So those big high school invitationals, I just can't get to as much because either I got the mom guilt of like, oh, I'm gonna pawn my kids off on my in-laws again, or they just desperately need my FaceTime with me. But I do go to the state gymnastics meet every year that I can, depending on our meet schedule. But yeah, it's mainly, recruiting online because the club meets are when we have meets. And so it's really hard. And, when I was in club, we went to one travel meet a year, and it might be Wisconsin. Like we went to the Salto Invite a bunch. Now they're traveling, multiple times throughout the year all over the country to go to these meets for club meets. And so it's just kind of harder to go to those big meets and see them all where they are. But we definitely get to, USAG, what is it, DP state, trying to remember the new words, and we'll get to regional. I won't be able to go to regionals this year. I have a family wedding. And then I'll be at DP nationals. So I'm getting to as many as I can. It's just a little bit trickier.
Yeah. And
Eventually it'll get better.
yeah, I love it. And can you talk about your own personal journey with the sport and where you grew up in Minnesota and how it led you to Gustavus as a student athlete, and also it's led you into getting this position from being
Yeah.
assistant to a head coach?
So my journey, I think, is pretty crazy. So I'd watched Casey's podcast. So Casey and I grew up together, same club, when we were really little, and then I had switched clubs. So we started tags with Brian Huff at Tag South when he was there, and then I switched to Olympic with Gabor and Katitza, and then eventually left there and went to Gleason. So I know, like, there's so many of my athletes that are, lifers at their gym, and I think that's so cool. And I don't know if I would use the term gym hopper for me because it wasn't like frequent, but I did definitely, go to 3 different gyms and compete at 3 different gyms in club. But then to make it to level 9, we had a rule in our gym that I had to quit any other sport that I was doing. And I did track. I love track, and I was unwilling to give that up. So my junior year, I was supposed to go to level 9, and instead I went high school. And I'm from Eden Prairie, so I'm really lucky that we had a phenomenal high school program. And a high school program that allowed me to not just maintain my skill level, but get better. So I actually developed and gained, I learned my double back off bars in high school. I learned a souk in high school. That's very abnormal, I would say. We had phenomenal coaches and just a really strong team. We got second at state my junior year, and we won my senior year. But my coaches there, then eventually, that's how I got the job here. So I wasn't planning to do college gymnastics. I went to Ohio University to start. I wanted to go in international relations. I wanted to be an ambassador. And so that's why I went there. And I walked onto their track team. I went to my first 6 a.m. lift, and I said, I'm never doing that again. I quit. Lifting wasn't what we did, in 2004,
Mm.
and 2005. And I'd never done it before. And it was not, I just mentally wasn't where I needed to be to do that. And a big part of it was Ohio University is a long way from home. And instead of, supporting our own school, they were watching the OSU game on TV. And, like it wasn't the culture that I thought it was going to be when I got there.
Yeah.
Loved the school, loved my semester there, but I ended up transferring back to Gustavus, and I did like the club gymnastics thing for that semester there, which I know has dramatically developed into a much more serious competition than it used to be, in the early 2000s. So I ended up transferring here. I wasn't sure how gymnastics was going to go. I knew I wanted to do track because I knew they recruited me for track at a high school. And I was lucky enough to walk into a team that was just amazing, and I fell in love with Gustavus. And I tell recruits all the time, like, I want you to visit schools because you're going to know where it feels right. And I refused to look here in high school because I didn't want to be close to home. And then I stepped foot on campus here, and I was going to transfer, and it was just like an aha, like, this is home moment. And it was just right. And then in terms of the coaching aspect, I was actually a track coach in grad school. And then for 2 years at McAllister College up in the Twin Cities, I was the hurdle coach. My husband coached at a school in the cities up there at Bethel University, and he got the job down here. And I came down, and one of my high school coaches had gotten the head job that year here, Charlie. And so he needed an assistant. It was not a high paid position, and I was moving down no matter what. I didn't know what I was going to do for a job. Had just finished up my thesis and got my master's degree. And he was like, do you want to be my assistant? And I did it. And that was a crazy year. And then this position fell into my lap. I got very lucky. It is super not normal. It is not the normal path to get a head job in college gymnastics, especially at Division III, where there are, only 17 of us.
Yeah. Now, when you got that opportunity to become the head coach there, what was the emotions, especially kind of going with your own personal path where gymnastics was something that you did love, but most of the time, a lot of athletes went from club to college, right? And not taking that exact route and having an opportunity to get there. Can you talk about the emotions that you had when you finally got this opportunity?
It was kind of indescribable. I mean, I love Gustavus, and I loved Gustavus before I was a coach here, with every fiber of my being. It's truly is, you are a lifelong Gussie, and it sounds so cliche, but it's real. Um, and I loved my experience, and I knew I wanted to support the program, and at that point, it was kind of a rocky future for Division III gymnastics, and so I was just so grateful for the opportunity, and like it was humbling. Like it was like, oh my gosh, like this program that I love so much, like I now get the opportunity to lead this and see where I can take it. And at that point we had, plateaued pretty good for a long time there after our history of being so good. Um, but it was just so exciting, and I knew that I wanted to change the culture of the team. And again, I loved my team, but it was very much like there were so many of us and we were all the same level that you were competing, but at the same time you're competing with each other for your spot in the lineup. And there was a slight level of like, okay, but if she falls on me, maybe I'll get in the lineup, right? And I knew that I had to eliminate that mindset. And so my experience, I think, as a high school gymnast on a super competitive high school team, I think really helped me be able to put the team first and get the team back to focusing on team first. Because in club, now, club team competitions are a lot more intense and serious than they were when I was in club way back in the day. But everybody competes whatever they're capable of competing, right? Now, they can scratch events. There are event specialists these days in club gymnastics, but here I have 20 on my team, and I have 14 girls that could do a 10 start value floor routine, and only 6 of them can compete.
Mhm.
And so trying to get their mindset to like, we're doing this for the team. This is the why. And even if I'm 7, even if I'm 8, even if I'm 14 on the ranking, I'm important, and I'm going to push the top 6 to get to where they need to be. And I really think that my 2 years in high school gymnastics on my competitive high school team really helped me be able to do that here.
Yeah. And you've mentioned mindset a few times, and even for your own personal journey. Can you kind of talk about the time during COVID and what that time was for you, and if you're okay with it?
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to kind of talk about, especially when you go into isolation, right? Where COVID we had to, and you have like a connection with your team and not really being able to do what you do every day and interact with it and have those people around and kind of, if that's like your why, right? And when you have that taken away and not having those same opportunities, can you kind of talk about your journey with that and how you kind of were able to work yourself back into a place where you felt um good about your not necessarily yourself, but just kind of felt better in your mental space?
Yeah, so COVID was tough, right? So we were able to get that year in 2020, we were able to get our regional meet in. My athletes that graduated last year, they were freshmen that year. Um, we had a rough regionals. But I had one athlete that was supposed to go to nationals at Ithaca, was poised to potentially win beam and all around. And then obviously nationals didn't happen. And then, we were like, oh, okay, like no big deal. And that one athlete, actually her dream job at the time was epidemiologist. Like she wanted to be Fauci at that in, early March of 2020 before crazy things happened. And she was like, I don't know, guys, like this is kind of a big deal. And we are like, no, like we'll go home for 2 weeks. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And so it was really hard when those emails would come and I would have to call my team, especially my seniors, and say like, I'm not going to see you again. Um, that was really hard. But luckily technology helped a lot. Zoom helped a lot. And so, it was like, okay, we missed nationals, but that's kind of how, the end of the year, like this is kind of when a little bit of a break would come in my time seeing my athletes, and then going into summer. It didn't really get crazy, I would say mentally for me until fall. That fall of 2020, my now seniors were freshmen and we only brought the freshmen in for a month. We were socially distanced, like we had to put tape spots in the gym and it was like you had to be in your pods and you couldn't intermix pods. And it was just a lot of mental gymnastics that you were going through to try to figure out how to get this to work, to get your athletes to get these events they need to get to keep everybody safe. While at the same time, as I've mentioned before, my husband is also coaching, right? Um, Somehow, and we don't know if it's from his athletes or from somebody else, but my husband got COVID on Halloween, tested positive that year, and I went into lockdown in my house for 6 weeks. Um, and at the same time, the athletes then got sent home at Thanksgiving and didn't come back until middle of January. And so I then went another 2 months without seeing my athletes. I had just seen my upperclassmen for 6 weeks for the first time. And now I'm gone again. And that was really, really hard. And we didn't know if we were gonna get meets, what was gonna happen. We were going in and out of meets. We only got 4 meets that year. It was a pretty crazy, crazy situation. And I would say the moment that changed it and helped me reframe my mindset and kind of eliminate anxiety and get back into the real world was our last meet of the year. The WIAC had a rule that we couldn't have fans, and that was the MIAC rule too. But our last meet of the year was at Winona. And Winona State is a Division II school for every other sport but gymnastics. And they allowed fans. It was April 1st of 2021. And they allowed fans. So I found out last minute I had the seniors that year, their parents flying in from all over the country to get to their kids' last meet. And that moment was just so cool to be able to see those fans and to be able to see people in person again in a meet, and to see how happy and excited that made my athletes. That really helped the mindset a lot. And it was kind of in that moment that I realized, like, I don't care anymore. Like, I mean, I do care, but like, I don't care as much anymore about winning and losing. Like, that's not in the grand scheme of life what people are going to remember from your time as an athlete. It's the feelings and the emotions and the relationships that you have. And so from that point on, it kind of changed the mindset of all of us in the gym, and we now work on that. And there's some other things that came after that went along the way, and some injuries that happened to that freshman that was supposed to go to nationals and do so great. Then the next year when nationals was at Ithaca, she tore her Achilles. And so kind of all of those things just helped us refocus on why are we here? What are we doing? What's the point of this? And obviously I want to win. I want high scores. Last year setting school records was so fun. I mean, I'm not going to say it wasn't, and I don't want that feeling.
Yeah.
That's not my whole worth as a coach, and my athletes' worth to me as people is not predicated on their ability to get a 9.8. It is about the relationship I have with them, the growth I get to watch them have as athletes, and then the relationships that they build each other.
Yeah.
My class, like there's my college class, there's 10 of us from my graduating class of 09 gymnastics at Gustavus. Obviously in that big of a class, you're going to have like little groups within the group. But we can still text each other and see each other, and it's like no time's passed, and we're a family. And
Yeah.
that's what I want for my athletes. And I think that through COVID and all of the ups and downs that came with it, I think that really helped my assistant and I kind of reframe our brain to know, like, we're going to keep pushing the skills. But I'm not Division I, not Division I coach. I don't have a bonus structure in my contract. So that's not the end result for me. The end result for me is I want happy, healthy student athletes that are graduating and that are going to succeed in life and be happy adults and look back at Gustavus and love their time. And yes, you remember the meet you set the school record, you remember that stuff, but in the end of the day, like, obviously national championship might be a little different, but
Yeah.
the end of the day, our record that year isn't gonna determine for my athletes in 10 years from now, when they look back at last season on how they felt.
Right. And how did you feel like it allowed your team to really reconnect? Did you see a change in the culture of your athletes prior to COVID and then post COVID? Did it seem as what you kind of realized, where the connection between people is more important than the wins and the losses and that type of journey? Could your student athletes start to show and start to realize the same things that you kind of came to a conclusion?
I'm not sure if it was COVID that did it for them or, as I mentioned, a couple of years ago, we had a lot of injuries. So we had 2 Achilles ruptures in a month. And then, the next year, last year, so last year when we set our school record at Stout, we actually 5 minutes into floor warm-ups before the meet, we had a senior go this way and a senior go that way, and we had an ACL and an Achilles, both seniors. And that was the meet we broke the school record at. Like, we weren't supposed to. We were not supposed to go in and beat Stout. Like, that was never in the cards. Like, we knew that. Um, but I think in those moments, like watching those athletes get injured and then like their mentality of like my those two seniors, like they got hurt, they went down, they had their 20 minutes where they got to be upset about it, and then they refocused and they were all about the team until the end of the meet, and then they focus on themselves again. um and so I think through all the adversity of the injuries, that's how my athletes have really changed their mindsets of like, we're going to celebrate every day, and it's about the joy of watching your teammates do what they do every day, you know win or lose, start value, not start value, did it give you a connection, did it not give you a connection, that doesn't change the fact that they live and die by their teammates on the floor now. And I think they used to be much more internalized with themselves at meets, and now they very much like, we don't know when it's going to be the end, right? Like they've learned, I think, just the fragile nature of our sport and our bodies, and that anything can happen in this sport, and so they want to celebrate every opportunity they can to do what they love to do.
Yeah. And did you have any mentors that kind of helped you both when you became a head coach and then even post COVID or around that COVID time that really walked you through some of these things and kind of walked you through even the mindset change from being a about wins and losses to really just about people. And I want to bring up one person for me really quick, and not to make this about me, but there's a coach that's in who used to be the head coach at Roseville High School. And
Julie,
yes, yes,
that's one of mine too.
yes. And she was one person for me who, when I was so I coach high school gymnastics. I was a assistant coach and actually had one of your former athletes in Sophia at when she was at Henry Sibley. Now it's Two Rivers. And then also Sophie, not Sophia, it's Sophie.
Well, her name
And
is Sophia, but yeah, we call her Sophie.
yeah. And when I was a head coach at Woodbury, whenever we'd go to Roseville, she kind of took on that mentor role. And even to this day, I can reach out to her, and she was someone who was super significant to me about really making it about the person and making it about the relationships. And they had a lot of success in high school gymnastics during her tenure there with her staff that was the same,
Mhm.
pretty much the whole time that they were there.
Yep.
And those things were really important to me to kind of help me start to figure out my why and help me because again, when you're in high school sports, a lot of times it becomes part of the culture of the whole school, right? And wins and losses could matter a little bit more because again, when you have fans that are constantly coming, that's what they're looking at. They're not thinking, oh man, these are great people on the court or on the field and stuff like that. They're thinking about the wins and losses. So you as a coach can get caught up in that same thing, right? Hey, it's about wins and losses, making sure the fans are coming out and the school is proud and this and that. And having those mentors who can really make it about the things that are really important and taking the macro things and breaking it down into micro things and really learning how to on the daily be able to you know integrate those relationship pieces so then when you start to have the success or as you go on your journey you keep in mind what's important and don't get caught up into what happens when you do compete or in every practice that isn't amazing or when an athlete is struggling, it's like, hey, you keep struggling and we're not going to do well, right? And or hey, you're like you talked about that athlete who had who was in the running or in contention to be able to win some national titles, you could get to the place where you're like, you know what? It's about like us putting ourselves on the map and being that one, so you always have to make sure you're working or hey look at this opportunity got taken from you, and we're so upset about that. Rather, it's like, hey, you know what, I appreciate all the hard stuff that you did and all the work that you put in, and in some way life is going to reward you for all those, and hopefully you get an opportunity to really do that. So kind of going on this bunny trail, can you kind of talk about mentors who are really important to you?
Yeah, I've been lucky to have a lot of really good mentors on my coaching path. So early on, Julie Castellano she was wonderful. She's a Gusty alum, and so she just was a champion. And I kind of got reconnected with her because one of my athletes, an alumni mentor program that we have for our students at Gustavus that connects them to alumni's kind of after college and get just a connection in the real world for the future. And one of my athletes connected with her, and so she started coming to meets, and that really helped me a lot. Just her support and the text she would send no matter what after a meet, and really just building me up as a person. Focusing on making sure that you can be constructive criticism with also uplifting the individual. And so she was really helpful in that capacity. But and I don't know how much you got to see this as an assistant coach in the WIAC, but the WIAC is a remarkably close-knit group of coaches. So I've had a lot of mentors, like I could call any one of them up about anything and talk to them about anything. And when I started, I was the first, Gustavus had some turnover, but I was one of the first new coaches in a long time, and we've had some turnover since. But I got to Lauren from Oshkosh taught me a lot about what it was like to be a young head coach. At the time, it was Barb was the head coach at lacrosse. And Barb was just a champion for me, helping me get the confidence as a coach in meets and fighting for things. And I'll never forget nationals in 2016, her trying to get, telling me if you get a red card, it doesn't matter. Like you have an individual, like there's no team score deduction that's going to happen. Like you need to fight for your athlete because there was just a ridiculous score that happened. And really just helping me learn that confidence as a coach in meets. But you know, Jean who was at Eau Claire, and Becky who was at Winona. I mean, and Becky at Stout, they've all been huge life mentors, and to this day, Jen at Whitewater, like she's a coach that I can call, and she's tough. She's a tough cookie, and she's a passionate individual, and she's gonna call me on things that she sees me do wrong, and she's gonna help me, fight for things that I think are wrong, or really fix my mindset. And she's been one that's helped me a lot with like my athletes, and how to kind of change my mindset with some of them, and really learn that like at the end of the day, my job isn't to make them all like me. It's to help them grow and be better people. And, I had some tough experiences with some athletes for a while. I mean, it's hard to start out as a head coach. And really all of those people have helped me just learn, like, maybe you need to make cuts to send the message to make the program what you want it to make, but make it like unapologetically yours. And so that's me. I might be too nice of a coach. I might not be as tough as they want me to be sometimes, or make cutthroat decisions, but I'm unapologetically me, and I want my athletes to know that, and just know that I do it out of love and care for them, and that I really do see a vision, and this is how I believe it's going to happen, and getting them to buy in their trust. And I think without those other coaches in the WIAC, like I would have sunk a lot sooner. But then here at Gustavus, my ADs are incredible. My assistant AD, she's our SWA. She is like my direct reporter. And she is just a wonderful person for me to talk about all aspects of life. We do our check-ins, and it's supposed to be about work, right? But she's checking in on me as a person. And Gustavus does a really good job of making it about the people, and making sure we as people are good. And so that has really, I think, also impacted the way I coach and how I run my team, is that I coach the person first, because I need to make sure that they're healthy. And there are things that can't, right? There are things that I am not trained to do. I am not a mental health therapist. I can't help with some of these things.
Yeah.
Here are your resources. But I have to make sure that you are healthy and safe before I can push you then to be a better athlete. And they've helped me a lot with that, because I couldn't push myself to be a better coach without, my assistant AD, like making sure that I'm okay mentally. And she would say, like, before you're allowed to do any coaching today, like I need you to go for that 30-minute walk to clear your head that you need mentally for you. She's really good about that stuff, and help me set goals and all of that. So I'm extremely blessed. I know that my administration is not normal college athletic experience. We are a very close, tight-knit community. And honestly, all the coaches here, like I can bounce any ideas off of any of them, and they help with all of it. And I'm also very lucky that at my institution, we have a really strong women's athletics programming teams. Like our
Yeah.
volleyball team is nationally ranked. Our women's basketball team is 6th ranked in the country right now. Our women's hockey team's #2 in the country and the defending national champions. Like our tennis team's incredible. Like we just have really strong female athletics that it's also helped a lot.
Yeah. And can you also talk about the staff that you have that kind of help you walk alongside of your athletes and kind of execute the vision that you have?
Yeah, so one crazy thing about us is I only have one assistant coach, so it's just two of us. Her name's also Erin, so we're the Erins. My team calls her Erin because her name, as they say, is spelled like it's supposed to be, and my name is not. But I also came first, so I'm Erin, she's Erin. She's been with me for 3 years now. And she is truly the yin to my yang. She keeps me level-headed. I'm the hugger, she's not a hugger. I'm the emotional one, she's the, calm one. I am not good at getting their mindsets right all the time because I get kind of crazy and frantic too. And she's just the one that can like talk them down a level and help with all that. But she has been a wonderful addition to the team, if nothing else than just a calming presence in the gym. But my athletes, we do a lot of they help me coach. We will use iPads and watch film and analyze. And I'm really lucky to have athletes that when they're on their rehab rotations are able to, maybe do their ankle rehab and be able to help watch an event because there are only two of us in the gym. Um, so it is a crazy situation that most programs don't have, but we don't have like lacrosse gets the ability to have GAs, all the time because they just have a huge grad program and we're getting our first graduate program starting in the fall with athletic training. So a liberal arts school is just a slightly different beast
Yeah.
in that capacity.
Yeah.
But I'm really lucky that I have such a wonderful assistant coach that really helps keep things light. But she coached for 20 plus years at Roseville Gymnastics at the club
Yeah.
at Roseville. So I'm really lucky that she has that background in just the technique and basics and the way USA Gymnastics teaches gymnasts how to do the basic skills that she can break it down for them and has really just changed a lot of my focus and focusing more on the details of things instead of just we got to get the big skills, we got to get the start values. Okay, but if we don't do them well and we don't do them clean, what's that going to do? You can throw your ankle full all you want, but if you have a built-in 4-10 deduction in the skill, is it worth it?
Yeah. Yep. No, for sure. And do you rely a lot on your leadership within your team, like within either a leadership council or having senior leaderships or captains? And if you do, what does that look like at Gustavus?
So we are also in this capacity unique. I eliminated captains and a leadership group a couple years ago. This is, I would say, the first year that I've really seen it. And now my seniors do take charge. Like they just naturally will take charge of things. They've done it the longest. But I tell every single person on my team that I want them to feel like they have ownership of our team and have leadership in our team. Now, it really is our seniors, just naturally that's what's going to happen. And I have 7 of them that are going to lead things. So, they plan outside of the gym team bonding activities. They lead warm-ups every day. And they're more of my direct communication line with the team. But instead of going through like a group, I have just found it for my team and my culture better to directly communicate with everybody. And I think it's allowed, everybody's got great ideas. And so,
Yeah.
I have sophomores that are like, okay, I know not everybody likes to analyze film, but this is why I think it's important. What do you think of that? And right, I'd never thought about it that way. I think that's a great idea. Let's do it that way. We analyzed film yesterday and everybody loved it because they're like, wait, now I actually understand why I'm getting the scores I got. I'm like, well, I've told you guys this, but it just took them hearing that,
Yeah.
from one of my sophomores for them to really stick. And so I appreciate all of them having leadership and ownership on the team. But I do obviously just default to the seniors because that's how it works. But the senior class, I would say, is the first senior class that I can tell you in 10 years really, while they want it to be a great year for them, they know that that comes from the team having a great year.
Yeah.
And they want their legacy to be that Gustavus Gymnastics focuses on the team and not just themselves.
Yeah. No, I think that's really cool and really important that one, leaders can emerge without being called upon and having that natural opportunity to, but also the ones, like you said, your seniors who kind of take on the initiative to just know that, hey, I've been here, I know how things are done, and kind of just to kind of help out, right? Especially when you don't have an opportunity to have multiple coaches or even have designated event coaches for each event, and or a GA who can take on some of these other responsibilities and stuff like that, and where it's on the head of just you and your assistants. I think that's very cool. And on the academic side, can you kind of talk about what academic degrees that people like to pursue, or even that Gustavus is known for? If someone were to say, hey, you know, where did you go to school? And they said Gustavus, what degrees would be the most lucrative because it came from Gustavus?
Yeah, so my athletes are kind of all over the board. For the most part, they're all science. Science major Gustavus is really known for our science programs. Our science building is called the Nobel Hall, and we have the Nobel Conference here, which is based on the Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel laureates, and they come, and it's not always the Peace Prize, but we have different topics every year for that conference. But I have a lot of athletes that are in sciences, whether that be psychology, health and exercise science, chemistry, biology, pre-med, pre-PT, pre-OT, all that stuff, and nursing. Really, Gustavus being a liberal arts college really it prepares everybody in every field for anything. But I would say definitely, the sciences are big here and huge. But also is business, so is education. And really in Minnesota, obviously it's a very niche thing. Like it's a small liberal arts school in Minnesota, and it's really well known within Minnesota. But you wear your 3 crowns, your Gussie shield anywhere in the country at an airport, and people know you. Like somebody is a Gussie and they will find you.
Yeah.
So I would say, in terms of like lucrativeness, we have a really, really, really high placement for things like med school placement. But grad school, pre-professional programs are huge here. But I mean, all of our academics are really great. I would say we used to definitely be known for being a teacher's college, and that's maybe reducing a little bit slightly because of, I would say, costs with salaries. But nursing is huge here. Right now are the biggest growing fields. We have our psychology and health exercise science. So, the pre-PT, pre-OT kind of athletes. And then I just recently learned this. You can go to med school with a psychology degree. So you still need the requirements, the basic requirements stated in, so you still need those classes, but without having to go above and beyond maybe what you would need with a chemistry or biology degree. So I do have a couple of athletes doing that route as well.
And what is the tuition? Because it's a private school, correct?
Yes, it is a private school. Tuition's insane. But I tell people don't look at the sticker price because nobody pays a sticker price. So I think sticker price, I don't even pay much attention to it. I think sticker price is with tuition and room and board is over 60. I think we're at like 63 maybe. But Gustavus offers incredible financial aid. For many of my athletes, it ends up being cheaper for them to go to Gustavus than it is for them to go to one of the other public schools in the WIAC. It's just with the aid we offer, and then whether that be academic aid or need-based aid, plus all like the little scholarships here and there, it's a lot. So it's crazy that it's, almost double what it was when I was in college, but my athletes are all graduating with less debt than I had, and there's more aid available to them than I had available to me.
That's cool. Because I think that's really important that you talk about, because if you just said that, someone could have been like, all right, let me go see somewhere else.
Oh
Because
yeah, you say 63 and parents like, I'm out. No, and I get it. Trust
right.
me, I get it. But there are really special things about Gustavus that you have to at least have a conversation with me or admissions about to figure out. So we're changing our entire academic program next year where we do courses now. So 3 courses is full-time, which is the equivalent of 12 credits at a different school that does the credit hours. So we're switching to credit hours next year. We are block scheduling. So every day from 3:30 to 5:30, you can't do anything required that isn't ensemble or athletics. Like that is to me so cool. And it shows how important athletics is for our student experience here. But we also have, I think, a new thing next year called the Gussie Guarantee. So as long as you're doing your job, right? You're going to class, you got decent grades, you're not sitting in your room playing Fortnite 24/7, and you're on a path to graduate. If you are unable to get the classes you need to get out in time in eight semesters in 4 years, it's on us. Our 4-year graduation rate is phenomenal, and I say all the time, if you don't get out in 4 years, like you're doing something wrong, right?
Mm.
One of the really good benefits of our small school is that you're going to get into the class that you need to get into in the order that you need to get into them. Now, there are obviously special circumstances that change that. Like maybe you decide you want to be an ed major and you join late. So I have an athlete that's a sophomore right now that just decided she want to be an ed major. So there's a chance that she's got to go an extra semester for her student teaching. Or let's say last minute you switch and you want to be a nursing major, and that's a 2-year program, right? You get in your junior year and you start the program then. So maybe you don't start till your senior year, so you might have to add another year. But for the most part, that's very, very, very abnormal here.
Yeah. And is St. Peter
Mhm.
a college town? And does the college really interact with the community? Does the community really interact with the university or the college? Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a college town. It's, Gustavus, St. Peter is about 12,000 people. We're about an hour south of the Twin Cities, and we are 15 minutes from Mankato. So, one of the bigger towns in Minnesota that's got about 60,000 people. But St. Peter itself is definitely, the college is very integrated into the town. We're kind of up on the hill, but people come to our sporting events all the time. We do, a lot of community events, meetings, whatever it might be, um, all the meetings in town, like they all happen in our, on campus with our facilities and our dining services and stuff. But the town's very, very integrated with Gustavus and Gustavus with the town. It still feels weird for me to say that I'm a St. Peter resident because I've lived here for 11 years and we own a house. And so I guess we call them townies. That's our affectionate name for them, but they call themselves townies too. So,
Yeah.
now that I'm a townie, I see it a little differently. Um, there's some chaos, obviously, that comes with being a college town. But it's a lot of fun, and it also drives our general community to be better, especially, we have cooler restaurants. We just got a brewery. We're getting another brewery. We're getting a new fancy Italian restaurant. We're growing. We surprisingly have like 6 coffee shops. My team and I are obsessed with coffee, so coffee is a big deal. I guess you don't have to like coffee to be a Gussie, but you have to at least find something at Starbucks you like, because I plan our trips around Starbucks locations.
Love it.
But just we like our schools are so good because, right, if you're a college professor, you want your kids to have great schools. You're going to demand that, and you're going to be willing to invest, with your tax dollars in that. And so we have phenomenal public schools here in St. Peter, and we're just really lucky to have the community that we have.
Yeah. And do you have any kind of last minute things, not really last minute, but to kind of close off the interview and our conversation, can you talk about anything that's like important to you that you would want the listeners, viewers, anybody, if there's a coach, a parent, or a potential prospect student athlete that wants to look into Gustavus or even just wants to know more about you, what would you kind of like leave with them to kind of like final thoughts to leave with them?
I mean, I would just say, reach out, have a conversation with me. I'm a talker. I can talk for hours. I'll tell you anything you want to know about me. I'm an open book. Sometimes maybe too open. But you know, I would say the final thought I want to have about, Gustavus Gymnastics and myself is we have such a storied history, and our recent finishes in our conference and lack of team appearances at nationals doesn't define us, right? Like we had our best team year ever last year, and I didn't for the first time ever have anybody at nationals. And that doesn't mean it wasn't a successful season. We had a phenomenally successful team season, but we did it because we were all up to our level. And it didn't, I didn't do it on the backs of one individual that maybe is a stud that can get us to nationals and win a floor championship, right? Like we had a surrounding cast for everybody, and we're all upping our level. But that can be really something that turns parents and coaches and gymnasts off from looking at me and saying like, well, Gustavus hasn't been great lately, or it's so expensive. Like, why would I go there? And I would say like, there's a reason it's expensive, right? Like obviously it's a private school and that's the reason, but there's value in it. And if you come to campus, if you talk to me, if you talk to my athletes, you're going to understand the value. And that doesn't mean it's going to be the right fit for you. It might not be, but don't not explore that option just because of what the online sticker price says. Anything is possible if you want it to be,
Yeah.
and if you are passionate enough to make it happen. And I know that my team is going to go places, and I just want some athletes to be willing to pave a path. You know, my athletes chose Gustavus because they want to return us to national spotlight. And we're doing that. You know, we had the highest average score jump last year of any team, you know, in our conference. Like, we're doing these things, and I need more people that are willing to take that chance on me, and not, for lack of a better phrase, taking the easy way out and just joining a team that's won a bunch of championships and they know they're going to make it to nationals as a team and just get a free ticket, right? What would you rather do? Help a team get there for the first time and win the first national championship in a long time, or sit the bench and get the ring? You know, I want a bunch of athletes that want to be active participants and have the passion that I have. And I don't, you know, while I would love 12 swim bios on my team, that doesn't mean they're the right fit for me. And my job is to find the right fit. And
Yeah.
I just want people that want to be Gusties, and Gusties are passionate, so passionate. And I am an overly passionate human about everything that I do. Um, and I want to just share that passion with everybody because I find so much joy in it. I really do. And it sounds so silly, but I don't find as much passion in watching my athletes do gymnastics as I do in watching them become amazing humans.
Yeah.
And that you've been at the college level and you the high school level, and now I'm sure in the club level you get to see it too, and it's so different at every level. But getting to see the girl from 18 and a high school graduate to 22 and a college graduate, it's just incredible. And I'm so lucky to have had 10 years to watch it happen, and I hope that I get another 10 plus to continue to watch it happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and kind of being vulnerable even about, the mental health part, because I think it's really important. And I think it's important to talk about too, that even though we're in leadership roles as coaches or head coaches and stuff like that, it's sometimes we feel like we have to keep that within, right? And be always strong for our athletes. But I think it's important for us to admit that we go through similar
Mhm.
things. And so we can walk alongside them
Right.
when they go through their struggles. And especially going through a competition, I can't even imagine seeing two of your seniors getting
Mhm.
injured and hurt, in one meet, but yet your team was able to rise up, and what that could do for a person and for a team and for a culture. And I'm excited for where you guys are going to be going and heading, and excited for you guys to reach those goals that you had mentioned. And hopefully more people tune into this, um, and also being able to have those right athletes that you're talking about who wants to be part of history. So thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Heated Conversations with head coach Aryn of Gustavus College. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Heated Conversations. I'll see you guys on the next one.